things are put in the mouth of the Western media against Hezbollah. We've been engaged also in fighting the Israeli incursions and aggressions. Many Arab countries' governments are proxies and are puppets in the American hand.
Lebanon's Hezbollah movement is condemned as a terrorist group by many countries, including the US and most Arab states. But it also has a powerful political face, with seats in parliament and government. My guest this week from Beirut is one of its politicians, Ibrahim Mousawi. How does the self-named Party of God reconcile its very different activities? Ibrahim Mousawi, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Welcome to you. Thank you. Good morning.
8-9 months of mass demonstrations against the political elite, you included, and nothing is changing. Where are the reforms that have been promised so many times in Lebanon?
Well, this is a long story, actually. When you want to talk about the reforms in Lebanon, you have to talk about the ailments of the system. We have been plagued by a mosaic of ailments and political diseases, if I might say. And this is a long way to go, actually. It has to do with the confessional system. It has to do with the economic system that we follow has been imposed. It does not necessarily belong to the benefits of the people. That's why we're going to continue to have this vicious cycle as long as we continue to stick to the same system.
Yeah, well, you in part bear some...
You're going to continue to do the same thing. You cannot expect a variant result.
You bear some responsibility for this as well, because your party, your movement, you were kingmakers in the design of this so-called latest government of technocrats. You also have seats in the cabinet. So I ask, where are the reforms? Why aren't you pushing for them? You blame the system. I'm asking, what's the point of having you in government if you don't bring about reforms?
About the ailments. I'm talking about the ailments of the system that has been going on for so many years, I mean for decades. Now we have reached where we reached. We should be held responsible for what happened. Everybody is responsible. Those who were in the government, we are part of the government. We don't deny our responsibility. We have to embrace our full responsibility in this, and we're ready to take part in the responsibility. But still, when you talk about the kind of reforms that we want to do, they should be structured. We are one component of the mosaic of components and constituencies in the Lebanese society. We take our share, and others has to take their responsibilities, and they should be blamed for what they did.
Yeah, well, there's a sense of urgency now, Mr. Mousawi, isn't there? There's a sense of great urgency now, because last week, a financial advisor working with the government in talks with the IMF, he resigned, saying there was no sign of reform, and he wouldn't go along with attempts to dismiss the size of losses in the financial system, as he said, which means he wasn't prepared to lie about the state of affairs. He's Henri Shaul, now former advisor to the finance ministry, and he said, I've come to the realization there is no genuine will to implement either reforms or a structuring of the banking sector. Why is there no will to reform? You talk to me about all the problems. If he says there's no will to do it, you're not going to address them in the future as you did in the past.
We've been pushing hard. We've been pushing and doing our share in pushing the government to do actual and structural reforms in what's happening. I tell you, yes, there is a kind of chaos in diagnosing the problem. There are differences in the numbers and in the estimates of the loss that's taking place in the financial, in the economic level. But still, I do tell you that we are part of this government now. We've been part of other governments before, and we are ready to take our responsibility in this, and we're doing this. But to tell you the truth, we've been engaged in fighting the Takfiri groups along the borderline in the east of Lebanon, and we've been engaged also in fighting the Israeli incursions and aggressions and
but there haven't been any Israeli incursions for a very long time, have there? There haven't been any Israeli incursions. So
no.
So you've been in Parliament.
We're still living in the consequences. We've been fighting the continuous Israeli incursions, and they have been escalating their violations for our sovereignty in air and on the ground and even in sea. They are trying to blackmail Lebanon for its share in the oil, that now we have reservoirs of oil in the sea. So you're talking about a lot of threats, strategic threats from the Israeli side, and we're doing up our part.
Mr. Mousawi, I'm talking about the fact. I'm talking about the fact that you've been in parliament since 1992, Hezbollah, in government since 2005. You wield enormous influence in Lebanon, and you've watched the growing economic collapse and the corruption. Why? Why? The corruption is getting worse. Transparency International's report last year showed 68% thought corruption had increased in the previous 12 months. Perhaps more shockingly, 65% said they'd use personal connections when dealing with the courts of justice. So your courts are now rotten. You've been in government a very long time and you haven't managed to change anything. You say you take your responsibility, but there's a sense of urgency now and nothing is getting done.
No, this is okay. This is something that should be addressed. We are part of the government, and this is questions that should be addressed to the whole government. You're talking about a country, you're talking about a state that has 17 sects. You're talking about more than dozens of political parties. We're part of these parties. We've been busy doing other very important strategic things against existential threats from the Israelis and the Takfiris. Others were heavily engaged inside the Lebanese politics. You know, before the Syrian withdrawal from Lebanon 2005, the whole governments were not part of the governments, and this kind of system has been going on for decades.
So you've all failed, haven't you? You've all failed.
Of the government. Yes. Look, when you want, you cannot decontextualize what happened. We were among the first to have a file of fighting the corruption. We said that corruption is a top priority, that unless we fight it genuinely, we're going to reach where we reached now, the collapse of the Lebanese economic system.
Yeah, you talk about a lot about corruption. You talk a lot about corruption, but nothing gets done. You know, in November, Hassan Nasrallah, your leader, he called on Lebanese judges. He called on Lebanese judges investigating corruption to begin with Hezbollah. He said, if there's a case related to any person in Hezbollah, go ahead, start with us, don't be scared. Really? Is that a genuine offer?
And what does this tell you? This tells you that we are very straightforward. This tells you that we are straightforward and transparent and very genuine in embracing this issue. We want to fight corruption.
It doesn't tell anything of the sort, Ibrahim Mousawi. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that.
We're talking about Dear Tim, we're talking about judiciary system. We're talking about a system that we want to reform. The only thing that you can do is to bring your files to the judiciary in order to follow up the cases. We have a problem in the judiciary, we have a problem in the judicial system, and we have a problem in the political system, and we have a problem in the economic system. We cannot simply hold one party responsible for what happened. We take our share, and we are trying to join forces with others in order to fight this corruption. You tell me you didn't
Mr. Mousawi, you know,
because we need to
Mr. Mousawi, Hassan Nasrallah said,
collaboration of efforts
as I pointed out, Hassan Nasrallah said, start with us. If there's anybody in Hezbollah, start with us. You think people have forgotten?
With us because,
you think people have forgotten what happened in 2008 when the government tried to remove your corrupt airport officials and close down its illegal communication system? What did you do? You seized parts of Beirut by force and you brought them to a virtual standstill. The fact is, you're just the same now as you were then. Sure, you might throw a few minor officials under the bus, but the top officials involved in corruption, you're never going to deal with them, are you?
Absolutely not. Well, this is not true, actually. I'm sorry to tell you that you have misinformation. I don't know who told you this. The officer who was in the airport was not a corrupt person. We have never supported any corrupt person, and we are ready to hand. When Sayyid Nasrallah says, start with us if we are corrupt, we did not fight, or we did not siege Beirut, as you said, because of the supporting corrupted people. We did that because we were defending our resistance, because a very dangerous decision has been taken in order to cut off the telecommunication of the resistance. And you know, when you fight an enemy like the Israeli enemy who has supremacy in the air and telecommunication, you have to have your own channel to fight this enemy.
All right, Mr. Mousawi,
let's supporting corruption. I'm sorry you used this, actually.
Let's talk about the massive street protests that we've seen in Lebanon in recent months, One moment you seemed to be listening to them, then you claimed with no evidence that they were being exploited by the US and Israel. And then last October you sent your thugs to beat up the demonstrators because they dared to criticize your leaders.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm sorry, Tim. I don't know you like that. I don't know that. Are you sure that we send our people? Do you have a proof for what
it was
say?
widely reported at the time.
There. We were against them
in October and December.
Widely. You know the media issue. You're in the media. I'm in the media. This is a misinformation. This
we don't make it up.
I can tell you. I live here.
Mr. Mousawi, we don't make it up.
I'm around. I live here, and I tell you. I tell you. We are not part of those who suppress the people. We are with the masses. We are with those who demonstrated. We want to protect them. We have the same issue. Actually, we consider...
Mr. Mousawi, in December, your supporters attacked an anti-government protest camp in central Beirut, and the army had to be called in to disperse the groups. Around the same time, you and your allies from Amal targeted other anti-government protest camps in different parts of Lebanon. So much for listening to the demonstrators and heeding their demands. You beat them up.
I can simply say this is not true. Actually, this genuine demonstration by the people, we were very happy to see that people came down to the streets in order to protest against all the corruption, against what's happening. We supported them, and I was part of this kind of diplomacy, this kind of negotiations, this kind of discussions with them. Our people, some of our people went and they took part in these demonstrations, and the end of this demonstration, the ultimate goal that they wanted is a very good goal. Actually, we have supported it from the very beginning. Now, after a few days, some groups jumped on the demonstrators and tried to use it for other political reasons, not for the economic or financial reform of the system, not to fight the corruption. And here was the problem when they started to attack the civil society and the civil public places, and here the governmental forces interfered. We have never attacked any one of them, and I'm sorry I hear this, you saying this. You have to research better than that. I can tell you.
Mr. Mousawi, you know very well that this was widely reported at the time from respectable news agencies and respectable news organizations. Look, the point is, right now...
I can tell you the big bulk of what has been reported is not right.
Okay, yes. As always. Right now, you're...
As always what?
As always, the claim that you're misreported. You always claim you're misreported.
Absolutely.
You must be a very misunderstood group, Mr.
We
Mousawi.
are a resistance movement. We are, no, there is an agenda, you know it, I know it, from superpowers, from regional powers, which designate us as a terrorist entity. If you come to Lebanon, millions of people support our cause. We are a resistance movement fighting for our liberation from the Israeli occupation, fighting in order to keep our country, the integrity of the country, the consistency of the country, the dignity of the country, and the liberation and the independence of the country.
But you're absolutely right. So far as the rest of the world is concerned, or a lot of the world is concerned, you are toxic. You are widely labelled a terrorist group, not just by the US and UK, but most of the Arab world. And the British government proscribed your entire organisation last year and accused you of supporting terrorism in Iraq and the Palestinians' territories. So in the West eyes, as well as most of the Arab world, you are seen as terrorists. How are you going to get money from the international community when you're part of the government seen as a terrorist group? How do you expect Lebanon to get money from the international community that it so badly needs?
This is the whole story. This is the whole story, actually. You start from one place, you subjugate a country, you occupy it, and you want to dictate your own policies, your own agenda against it. If the people fight back for their sovereignty and dignity, you start with this blockade, you start with this siege, you start with these sanctions and punishments. And if you say no, when you talk about the Arab world and the Arab systems and the other Arab governments, when you talk about Saudi Arabia, is this a democratic country or a democratic government that you're talking about? Most of the pro-Western governments in the Arab world, they label us as the Israelis, as the Western government label us. This does not say, majority has never been saying that this is right or this is wrong. If you are the majority, does not mean that you are right. We follow a path of independence, of resistance against the occupation, against the economic subjugation, and that's why we are labeled. It starts from the United States, and you know, many Arab countries' governments are proxies and are puppets in the American hands.
Yeah, well, the fact is you need, Lebanon needs Western money, and with you constantly threatening the United States, they're not going to get it, are they? Lebanon is not going to get it with you in government. You're one of the biggest obstacles.
Victimized by the United States. We are being victimized by the United States. The United States support Israel that crushing the Palestinian people rights, that are crushing the Palestinian people hopes in order to have a sovereign state. This is the United States and this is the West. Now they are trying to annex the West Bank, you know that very well. They annexed Golan Heights, you know that very well. Okay, I give you an example. What about Egypt and Jordan? They have signed negotiated treaties and they have signed peace treaties with Israel according to the American and Western will.
And the fact that you are an obstacle to getting the aid. American and European law enforcement has spent years charting your groups, associations with criminal policies, drug cartels and illegal money laundering operations stretching into Africa and Latin America. You say you don't get involved in this kind of criminality. Trafficking narcotics is against your religion.
Those words.
You say that. You say that. But we have admissions from some of your own people that they've been engaged in this kind of criminal activity.
If you have something, on the record, if you have real files, come and show them. We have always challenged the United States and all those who you say that we have kind of collaboration with the criminal groups or money laundering or whatever. Come and show us your evidences.
Okay, I have. Here's an example. Here's an example for you.
That has been used by the Western.
Here's an example for you. Let's take a man called Chetin Aksu. He pleaded guilty in August 2012 to providing material support for Hezbollah. Chetin Aksu. He pleaded guilty in August 2012 to providing material support for Hezbollah, conspiring to acquire anti-aircraft missiles and conspiring to import heroin into the US. You think he made that? He pleaded guilty. A strange thing to do if he wasn't. He pleaded guilty to doing that on your behalf.
Do you think that it is? Do you think this is very? I can give you scores of examples from the United States, like when they put someone in jail or put him under threat, that they can make files as much as they want. The problem is that you're taking the United States as an exemplary model for transparency, for authenticity, for genuinity. They are liars about this, actually.
Really? And that's your best answer, is it? Let's try Joseph Asmar, a man called Joseph Asmar, accused of trying to use his links to Hezbollah to launder drug money. He pleaded guilty in the US to a money laundering conspiracy charge. Prosecutors said he boasted that he could use his Hezbollah connections to provide security for drug shipments. My question to you is, what is the party of God doing offering security for illegal drug shipments?
Look. This is not, listen, this is not, when you have something like that, this is not going to be discussed on media. You have to take it to the judiciary. In Lebanon, we have a judiciary system that we want to reform.
He's pleaded guilty. These people have pleaded guilty.
What? I mean, yeah, many people pleaded guilty, actually. I mean, you can, if you want, the United States can make a whole population pleading guilty. I mean, the American policies, they make the Palestinian people plead guilty because they are fighting the occupation in Israel. Why don't you take such issues? You are decontextualizing issues, taking them from their historical context to put them in a lapse, and only in one part, in one segment that will distort the image. I'm sorry.
And Mr. Mousawi, you're trying to muddy the waters. According to the Drug Enforcement Agency, Hezbollah increasingly relies on criminal revenue from a wide array of sources that include the Lebanese diaspora, group members, affiliates, etc. The organization has even competed for money laundering contracts in the same manner as Colombian drug cartels and other criminal organizations. So you belong with some pretty shady groups on the international crime scene, don't you?
You can continue to mention all, if you want to continue this episode as long as you want, you can continue to mention as much as you want of examples, but this is not going to change the truth that these are things are put in the mouth of the Western media against Hezbollah, against any resistance movement against any resistance group in order to distort its image, in order to justify any sanctions against it.
You asked for examples. I gave you some. Let's talk, if we may, about your support for the Assad government, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, despite its shocking disregard for human life, especially civilians. You could hardly claim ignorance of what they've been doing. Or don't you, the party of God, have anything to say about policies of rape, torture and extermination that Bashar al-Assad and his forces have been carrying out? You've got no principles, no red lines as far as that sort of behavior is concerned?
Let me ask you about the Western media and about your government and the Western governments and the United States governments and what they did to the Israelis who crush the people every day, who occupy Palestine, who occupy parts of Lebanon, who occupy parts of the Golan Heights, and who continue to occupy also. They want to annex part of Jordan and parts of other places. I mean, if
we ask those questions in other programs. I'm talking to you about Hezbollah. I'm talking to you about Hezbollah because you represent Hezbollah, and I'm asking why you support a regime in Syria that carries out extermination policies towards its own people.
We're supporting our cause. We're fighting. Listen, we were fighting Takfiri groups who beheaded people, who took the hearts of people, who crushed the children, who made annihilation. We were fighting the Takfiri groups. It is a priority because they came and they carried aggressions against our part of the country. You know, we had wide operations against them in North Lebanon, in East Lebanon.
You're not answering the question, Mr. Mousawi. You're not answering the question about why you support,
I am answering the question directly.
You support a regime in Syria that tortures and exterminates its people.
We are fighting Takfiri groups in Syria. We are fighting Takfiri groups who were sent and were trained by the United States of America. In the records, it's there. You know it. Even the American officials recognized and they said that they made them.
Mr. Mousawi, the important thing is that by lending Mr. Assad your support, you became complicit in everything he did. And these are crimes against humanity. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said Syria had become a torture chamber.
And you are complicit with Mohammed bin Salman and all the atrocities he is making in Yemen. The United States and Britain and all governments, you are complicit with.
Why do you keep changing the subject? Why do you keep changing the subject?
In Yemen.
Why do you keep changing the subject? A lot of your people.
You're trying to equate us. You are trying to equate things in a wrong way. I want to hold you responsible, and you are in a responsible place for what you're doing in other places. Now you're talking about a resistance movement who represent only a small size of the Lebanese government, and you want to hold them responsible for all the evils in the region, while you want to wash your hands from all the atrocities.
I'm not holding you responsible for all the evils, just the ones
by the Western government.
Just the ones that you're involved in. And not everybody in your group is happy about your support for Syria. Sheikh Sobi Tufaili, who was a leader of Hezbollah, said a few years ago, Hezbollah should not be defending the criminal regime that kills its own people. Can I just finish the question? Can I just finish the question, Mr. Mousawi? Can I just finish the question?
This is an individual person. You're talking about one
Can I just finish the question? He said Hezbollah should not be defending the criminal regime that kills its own people and that has never fired a shot in the defense of the Palestinians. Those Hezbollah fighters who are killing children and terrorizing people and destroying houses in Syria will go to hell and cannot be considered as martyrs. How do you respond to that?
You're talking about one individual, Subhi Tfaili. You're talking about one individual, Subhi Tfaili. He represents only himself, if he represents himself. This is one thing. He's an enemy to Hezbollah because he was a leader and then he is alone now. This is one thing. I can bring you scores of other officials that do not agree or condone what the Western governments do. Does this make sense to you in the same track as well?
Mr. Mousawi, you haven't answered the question. We're running out of time. Let me just give you a final question. We know that Lebanon is fragile. How fragile is the country?
Perfectly well.
How fragile is the country, and what is the danger of a new civil war in Lebanon?
as long as the Americans continue their plots and conspiracies, as long as they continue their siege against the government, as long as they want to punish the whole Lebanese people, not only Hezbollah, this is going to continue to be a crisis for Lebanon. But we're not on the verge of a civil war. It's not like that. You're talking now about the last phase of the American Western conspiracy against the country. They were not able to defeat Hezbollah in 2006, not before. Now they have moved into this sanctions, into this siege, into this embargo, into this blockade against Lebanon.
Okay, so it's all the West's fault. It's all the West's fault. Mr. Mousawi, Ibrahim Mousawi, thank you very much for being on Conflict Zone.
Pleasure, pleasure, pleasure.